Brothers and sisters, we come here today to celebrate the blessing of guidance, to show our gratitude as a collective of believers as we come together responding to the call. The Quran told us, if you hear the call for Jumu'ah, then you must leave off your business and go. And so that's what brought us here today, the revelation that was revealed to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam 1,446 years ago. And so that blessing of guidance is the single most important and valuable blessing that we can all cherish. That is why he calls us together, that we will hear his ayat, his signs of revelation, his signs of the guidance of creation, and that we may understand how to live our lives accordingly. And so in this blessing of guidance, we seek his protection, we seek his guardianship. We ask him to forgive us as we try to stick to the straight path. We ask him to keep us upon it, and that our death will be in the remembrance of him and his oneness as we go to the inevitable. You see, the world that we live in right now has some very troubling moral situations, dilemmas of acceptance of behaviors, attitudes towards people and their livelihood that must be reflected upon, that we must have guidance in order to deal with it. Stories often help people to digest and contextualize the struggles we find in the moral dilemmas of the world. And so I wanted to bring to light, last January, there was a police officer in Seattle, Washington. He got a call that there's an overdose and somebody must come quickly to help that person. So he hit the gas and he starts going through a neighborhood 25 miles per hour. He did not put on his sirens, he did not put on his lights, and he struck and killed 23-year-old American Indian Jahnavi Kandula. She had just graduated college, had the world in front of her, and this police officer ran right over her going 70 miles per hour. The key point in this tragedy that I'd like to highlight today is the body cam footage of another officer, Detective Daniel Ederer, who happens to be the vice president of the Seattle Police Officers Guild. So he holds a very respectful place, long-term service as a police officer. Officer Ederer was recorded as he had finished his evaluation of Officer Dave. Was he impaired whenever he ran over this innocent woman who was just walking across the street? In that video, you find this officer, Ederer, who is the vice president of the Seattle Officers Guild, laughing about her being dead and saying that she had little value. He said this 23-year-old college graduate had little value. In his defense, this guy says that what he was talking about, he was mocking and joking about how the court system deals with wrongful death suits. But I've heard it myself, and it was a disgrace. It was egregious that he's laughing, talking about she's dead and that she has limited value. But I want us all to reflect and see, would this have been the case? Would he have laughed and talked about her limited value if the dead 23-year-old graduate student was blonde-haired Emily Johnson? That's the question we should ask ourselves. And so that is the reality we see in the world, that there are many, many examples all over the world of people devaluing the lives of those who are not from their tribal group. In other words, they're not one of us. And so we see people devaluing people's lives and not caring if they suffer or are killed or die because they're simply not from their group. I was on vacation the last week and I traveled up through Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, and New York City. And the level of homelessness and the suffering is sickening. But you would think that this is a governance issue because the families have failed. So what is the government going to do? Absolutely nothing consequential to help these people. And so there's this concept this very profound value called the golden rule. This refers to the ethic or value that one should treat others as he or she themselves would like to be treated. The first usage of this term was by British Christian theologian Charles Gibbon in 1604. So for over 220 years now, the golden rule is a very important value in the English language. Christians feel that this is their truth, because the New Testament gospel, we read the reports of Jesus, peace and blessings be upon him, teaching his companions that on multiple occasions you should treat others the way you would like to be treated. To the extent when Jesus was challenged by a Jewish lawyer, that what is the divine law? Explain this divine law. And then Jesus said famously that you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, your soul, and your strength, with all your mind, and you should love your neighbor as yourself. And they say that this is the entire law. So now where do we stand with this golden rule? That's a question we should all ask ourselves. It should all start when just opening up the Mus'haf. Before each chapter of the Quran, it says, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. In the name of, in honor of, in reverence to God, who he could have introduced himself to us when introducing his guidance to us in any way, about his knowledge, his power, his wisdom, his authority, his ownership. But he introduced himself with two words, Rahman and Rahim. These words refer to caring for and supporting the needs of others, especially those who need it. People who are struggling, people who are weak. And so he is defining himself as benevolent, caring, kind, merciful, compassionate. And so that is how he's describing himself to those that would read his guidance. So we as servants of God should embody that fundamental quality. If we turn to chapter 21 of the Holy Quran, verse 107, وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ. God says in the royal we have only sent you, Muhammad, for one reason, that you will be an act of compassion, of benevolence, of kindness to everyone and everything on earth. لِلْعَالَمِينَ. Everything you can imagine that you would embody, that your character would be caring, kindness, loving support to those around you. So this is the definition of the whole purpose of the Prophet Muhammad's mission. Islam is 100% all about this golden rule. We read through the Quran about ihsan, spiritual excellence. In Surah An-Nisa, وَاعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ وَلَا تُشْرِكُوا بِهِ شَيْئًا وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا. You should worship God alone. Don't confuse your devotion. Don't confuse your sincerity with created beings. Devote yourself fully to God. And then you must have excellence towards your parents. You must go beyond the accepted norm and serve your parents to the best of your ability. So then he goes on many other categories which are deserving of our excellence. And he says your family members, and he says the orphans, and he says those who are financially struggling and disadvantaged. He says your neighbor and your neighbor's neighbor. He says your colleague, your coworker, your classmate. And so he's telling us that we owe ihsan, excellence, to go beyond the basic norm of just treatment. The whole fundamental teaching of divine law, إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَأْمُرُ بِالْعَدْلِ. God commands to justice. What is justice? It is to treat people in a way that everyone else expects to be treated by law, as a code of ethics. So then it says, wal ihsan, meaning to go beyond that. Islamic model of the golden rule is to not just treat others as you would like to be treated, but to treat them better than you would like to be treated. And so this is the fundamental ethos of the believer. There is no scripture on earth, there is no religious group or teaching that emphasizes the prohibition and rebukes and blames the behavior of oppression, like the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. What is oppression? It is when one uses their power and their positioning to hinder or to belittle or to harm others. This is oppression. It is the opposite of the golden rule. And the Quran is replete with verse after page about the evil of the oppressors and how oppressors must be stopped and oppression cannot stand and no hostility should be against anyone unless they're an oppressor. You see? So the Prophet ﷺ was teaching his companions about this concept, as is narrated in the authentic collection of Ibn Hibban in his hadith collection. لا يبلغ عبد حقيقة الإيمان حتى يحب للناس ما يحب لنفسه من الخير. That no one will reach the truth of faith. No one will reach the proper understanding of faith until they love for all people what good they hope for themselves. The Prophet ﷺ is teaching very vividly this golden rule. And the Prophet ﷺ was sitting with his companions, as is narrated by Ibn al-Mulaqqin in the hadith that is hasan and acceptable according to the scholars of the chains of transmission. He said, لَن تُؤْمِنُوا حَتَّى تَرْحَمُوا. You're not real believers until you have benevolence for others, until you are compassionate, until you are kind and caring for others. And they said, but we are, O Messenger of God. He said, no, إِنَّهُ لَيْسَ بِرَحْمَةِ أَحَدِكُمْ صَاحِبًا وَلَكِنَّهُ رَحْمَةُ النَّاسِ رَحْمَةَ الْعَامَّةِ. It's not that you are kind if it's to your family member or your friend, meaning your tribe. If you're only kind and caring and compassionate to your tribe, then you don't understand Islam. You are not following Islam. You have not reached the pinnacle of faith, which is one of the reasons why the Prophet ﷺ very strongly rebuked the behavior of tribalism. To see the value according to one's ethnic or nationalistic or familial group. You see, it's about caring for everyone. As the Prophet ﷺ said, true kindness, true benevolence, true faith is that you care for everyone that you meet anywhere you go. And so the hadith in Sahih al-Muslim, the Prophet ﷺ said, "Irhamu man fil ard yarhamukum man fis sama." You must be kind and compassionate to each and every person on earth, and then you will earn the mercy of God. Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, the great scholar of hadith, he commented, he said, this includes everyone except for one type of person, and that is the person who is actively attacking you or oppressing you. In this case, you will fight that person to stop them from their oppression. You see? But even if that person is known to have enemy, he's an enemy, he has hostility towards you. But in the situation you're dealing with, that person is not being hostile to you. In our history, we have a very beautiful tradition. And we're seeing it in live feed when it comes to Palestine. That if you take a prisoner of war, you must feed them and clothe them as you would expect to be treated. You must treat them with kindness. Because now they have no ability to fight you and they are not fighting you. So there is no hostility or aggression or harm to be done to such people. And so we have the tradition of where the ruler, the king, or the general of the other army, that he got sick. And so the general of the Muslim army would be like, we'll send our doctors to go take care of him. Because right now he's not fighting in a battle against us. He's just a human being. He has potential to see the truth. And the Prophet ﷺ was the master of this open-ended pardoning and hope for the potential in others. You see, the Prophet ﷺ taught us, and you see, Umar radiallahu anhu was not a friend or a hopefully Muslim person before. This idea that, oh, that group or that person from that group or that ethnicity or that nationality or those people have no value. We are against them in whole. No, that is not the prophetic model. You see the potential that that person has in becoming a servant of God. And so you will give them the opportunity to see the beauty of Islam through this golden rule, which is the fundamental teaching of Islam. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم فاستغفروه فإنه هو الغفور الرحيم. بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. So we're seeing the justification and acceptance of a live, thoroughly documented genocide in Palestine. We are seeing the world turn away from the genocidal proxy war to control the land of Sudan. And many of us want to believe that each and every Westerner who's caring about Ukrainians care about them because they are white and not brown. And there is truth to that historically, as the ruling elite have created this model of racism in order to justify what they would like to do in taking the resources from brown and black people. But if you study the background of this conflict in Ukraine, you will see that the propaganda machine that goes to the media and the masses, it doesn't care whether they are Ukrainian or white at all. It cares about the economic and political interests they represent in their land in terms of the United States and Europe and what they call NATO. That's what they care about. And so these people are just pawns. And many Ukrainians are actually on social media coming to this realization that we're just pawns in some game between the West and Russia. Governance in the modern world has been developed and is maintained without a concern, a genuine concern for the welfare of human beings. In actuality, the governance in the modern world, globally speaking, it is about groups with power. And they seek to maintain their power through delegitimizing or dismissing the value of lives of those who don't support their political and economic interests. See, modern global governance is rooted in the ideas of 16th century philosopher Niccolo Machiavelli, specifically that of divide and conquer. Machiavelli defines the divide and conquer methodology of ruling the masses. He says, number one, you need to create and encourage divisions among the subjects to prevent alliances that could challenge the ruling elite, that they overpower each other and are easily governed. Number two, encouraging meaningless expenditures that reduce the capability of the enemies to resist the rulers. This is inflation and entertainment and all of these things, debt, and this is keeping you busy. Supporting and promoting those who are willing to cooperate and support the state interests. See, this is the Machiavelli has that model. Pretty much all countries are using this model. They've been using it. So the solution to all of these problems, you find, is an empowerment of the golden rule. You see, if you were raised and you're not thinking, you know what, the single most important thing if I know Allah and I'm a worshiper of Him is to be caring for and supporting the needs and being kind and compassionate to everyone I meet to the best of my ability. If you weren't raised like that and you weren't thinking of these ayahs and these hadith as like the most important thing after knowing Allah is to live that way in the world, then I can guarantee you the ruling class you were raised under wanted that removed from your moral priority system. Because why? Then the people come together and they challenge the corruption of those who are oppressing them. And that's the same thing here with Democrat and Republican. It's not different anywhere you go. They really believe that they're against each other. And so it's important for us to revive in our mindset, in our words, and in our actions, not only the golden rule as that we look out for and care for the interests of others as we would like to be treated ourselves, and that we care about other people, seeing ourselves in them, seeing our family members in their family members, as we are a human family, as the Quran talks about us. So it is important for us to revive the fundamental teaching of the prophetic mission. Chapter 21, Surah Al-Anbiya, verse number 107. وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ. We, in the royal we, God is talking about an important thing that He did. So He says we. It's a declaration of rule and authority. We have only sent you, Muhammad, to be an example and a leader and a guide of how to care for the needs and be compassionate and benevolent to everyone and everything on earth. That's the whole purpose of Islam. Is Islam doing that? Is that the priority you see in the Muslim countries? Inside, outside, anywhere? Or do we build like big clock towers and, you know? It's like right now in Bangladesh, people are starting to figure it out. And the ruling elite is like, no, those are Islamists, those are terrorists, they do divide and conquer. Watch out, those are against you. May God support them and give them victory against the corruption and the tyranny. The only way we will come there is that we stop with this buying into the politics of divide and conquer and hating and disliking people and being suspect of them because they're not one of us. And we see that us is the fundamental human reality. We are human beings. We all have souls that come from the same source. And all of us have red blood in our bodies. We all have families and we all hope for the best for people. When we live out this golden rule in our lives, in our families, with our neighbors, at work, at school, and we do it in a overt way of sincere service to God, then people will feel it and it will reciprocate by natural order. Well, naturally, people will pass it on. They will naturally give it back because it's the way we were created. It's the fundamental divine truth. Everything's symbiotic. We are breathing in the oxygen and we breathe out the carbon dioxide. And the trees and the plants are breathing in that carbon dioxide and they're breathing out the oxygen. This is the golden rule. It's just the way things are. There is night, there is day. You need both of them to live your life accordingly. We are all together in this. When we see it that way and we live that way and we organize our affairs in such a way, then the powerful will have a very hard time in their divide and conquer strategy. So we ask Allah, Ya Allah, we ask you to heal and cure us from the diseases of the devilish ways of this world. Ya Allah, we ask that you instill upon us a sense of knowledge and understanding of the Quran and Sunnah that revives the prophetic model of Muhammad ibn Abdullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Ya Allah, we ask your forgiveness and your mercy, that you pardon our shortcomings and weaknesses and our laziness and lack of sincerity. Ya Allah, make us a sincere people who are driven by knowledge from the Quran and Sunnah, a people who come together supporting each other as believers, who support the welfare and needs of everyone we meet wherever we go. Ya Allah, revive in us this beautiful fundamental truth of the golden rule. Ya Allah, organize our affairs accordingly. Ya Allah, eradicate the tyranny and corruption of this world, of those who would seek to divide, those who would seek to delegitimize and dismiss the value of human life. Ya Allah, we ask you to make us among those who struggle and strive for truth and justice, that peace and tranquility and prosperity can maintain for all who would like it. Ya Allah, we ask you to make us a people who hear a good word, follow it to the best of our ability, that we are worthy of your eternal forgiveness and your contentment, that when we are dying, that our last words are reflecting upon your oneness and our love for your beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Wa aqim as-salah.